In the original Beast Wars cartoon, the Maximals and the Predacons are the descendants of the Autobots and the Decepticons, with a handful of characters actually claiming direct ancestry to some of the original characters, though some of them are clearly meant to be jokes, like Rat Trap claiming that RC was his aunt, or Waspinator claiming that he is the descendant of Bombshell, the Insecticon. There are some that are meant to be taken seriously, like the fact that Optimus Primal is the direct descendant of Optimus Prime. But then we get to Grimlock. Grimlock is not a show character. His toy is just a repaint of Dinobots. But when you read the toy bio, it specifically says that he was a stalwart warrior who engaged in the Autobot-Decepticon conflict, and now, as a Maximal, he continues to fight the Predacons. Grimlock remained Grimlock, and he's one of the few characters to be confirmed to actually be his G1 namesake. In fact, him and Ravage were the only two of the original Beast Wars run to go that far. Ravage actually got to show up in the show, so we know that there is precedent for G1 characters to still be their original selves, but Grimlock is the other example. Eventually, Magnaboss would be retconned into being Ironhide, Silverbolt, and Prowl, but that came way later with IDW. It wasn't even hinted at in the original run, aside from Prowl thinking that he used to be a great Autobot strategist, but to be fair, Transmetal 2 Prowl also thought that, and that leads to its own can of worms. Go see the many toys of Prowl 2 if you want to figure that mess out. But still, let's not remove the fact that in the 90s, the only two G1 characters still around in fiction are Ravage and Grimlock. What was Grimlock doing exactly? Again, you have to keep this in mind. Ravage came from the future, the present day. He was sent by the Tri-Predacus Council to silence anyone that could hurt the Predacon cause. That was his reason for being with the Beast Wars crew. Why was Grimlock there too? And moreover, look at his bio. His rank is only 5. A far cry from the 8s, 9s, and 10s he usually got in G1. Despite everything else correlating, the idea that he is smarter than average but not a genius, far stronger, and the way that people always describe him as being one of the most powerful of all Maximals. So Grimlock is not on a war vessel, he's using a Predacon-type body, since him and Dinobot are using the same exact frame, but he's also now just average rank, a rank-and-file soldier. What's the story here? I want to name my sources right now. I'm using the IDW 2006 Beast Wars continuity and the cartoon continuity to inform my ideas here. At some point between G1 and Beast Wars, the Great Conversion took place. That is where all the Transformers became far smaller and used more energy efficient but also more powerful bodies. All Cybertronians were expected to make that change or go dormant, just due to the lack of energon in the universe at that point. That's also why in the Beast Wars cartoon, the Maximals and the Predacons get overloaded on energon so quickly. They're just not meant to be in an environment that still has that much raw energon lying around. So Grimlock is forced to lose his powerful Dinobot Commander body and become far smaller. At his current height, he would actually be about the same height as a Minibot, maybe someone like Brawn, a little bit taller than Bumblebee, but still not all that large. And he's trapped on Cybertron, where all the Maximals are. And even though the Predacons are certainly wanting there to be a war, there isn't actually any conflict on Cybertron proper during Grimlock's life. He's forced to waste his days away in complete and utter boredom. The only other Dinobot known to survive to this point is Swoop. And at that point, he's no longer even using the name Swoop. He's going by the Veteran, and whereas he is revered as a war hero and celebrated by the Maximals, Grimlock is often put to the side. And it's just because Grimlock can't reel himself in. In both the IDW sourcebook and his original toy bio, they make explicit mention that Grimlock has become increasingly sadistic. He doesn't just enjoy, but he salivates at the idea of killing Predacons. He enjoys using their internal wiring as floss at this point. And in the IDW comic, we see him relish at slowly tearing apart Predacons he comes across. So much so that he actually abandons the defense of the Ark in order to go track out what was left of the Beast Wars Insecticons and tear them apart. Look at the glee he has as he rips Man-Terror's wings off, or as he slowly bites into Drillbit. He loves this. He adores it. He's been waiting for it. And I'm not exaggerating. Going off the IDW sourcebook, Grimlock got so bored on Cybertron that he started signing on to any science vessel that would take him. And he would spend those trips in stasis because what he was hoping for would be for something to go disastrously wrong. Maybe they'd come across a hostile alien planet, or some pocket of Predacons that had gone rogue. Maybe there'd be a mutiny on the ship. Grimlock went on all these ships and slept the entire way in the hopes things would go so disastrously wrong that they would wake him up and tell him he could do whatever it takes to survive. Grimlock is so needing of conflict that he has allowed himself to essentially just be living cargo in the hopes that maybe he can strangle someone and get away with it one last time. To be sure, in the IDW comic book, Grimlock only shows up after all the other Maximals and Predacons. It took a long time for his stasis pod to reboot and scan him a new alt mode. But as soon as he was awake, what's the first thing he does? He sniffs out Predacons and he starts ripping into them. There is no context needed. He doesn't need orders. He doesn't question it. All he knows is that he's somewhere where he shouldn't. Predacons are over there. That's enough of an excuse to get away with. Just to be clear, Razor Beast and the other Maximals don't talk about Grimlock in a sense of trust. They have him around because he is the most dangerous and powerful of all the Maximals. Even Torka can't compare to Grimlock's sheer ability as a soldier. But it's not any love lost. They don't consider him a friend. They don't consider him an ally. They don't trust him. He's just the best defense they have. And he's the best defense they have because he's the only natural-born killer amongst them. I want to make this point abundantly clear. Grimlock is not a main character of this IDW story. He shows up in 4 issues, and even then it's glorified cameos most of the time. He does have some great lines and awesome moments, and it is my favorite design of Grimlock ever. But this isn't a character story about him. If anything, the story is much more about Razor Beast and Magmatron, maybe a little bit of Leo Convoy. Grimlock is there just to be another connection to G1, another way to build up the world of Beast Wars alongside the cartoon. I appreciate it though, because there has been so much given to us in the dialogue and in the source book and in the character bio that we now have a very rough idea as to what Grimlock's veteran years would have been like. Assuming that Beast Wars is a combination of G1 cartoon and G1 comic, which is how it was always been presented, we can assume that at some point, Unicron was defeated, the war ended, and what was left of the Decepticons willingly gave up their arms, with the Autobots and Decepticons eventually having to do the great conversion into the Maximals and Predacons. At that point, leaders such as Optimus Prime, Bumblebee, Megatron, and Starscream had been long since dead, to the point where, in the modern day, many of these figures are talked about almost in mythological terms. Starscream isn't even fully understood by the general populace, despite being the second in command of the other major army. Grimlock is still alive. As for his contemporaries, Swoop, Prowl, Silverbolt, Ironhide, and Ravage are all closely guarded secrets. The Magnaboss Council do not let it be publicly known that they are still the G1 characters. It's not even fully known what they do in the current Maximal government, just that they are calling the shot for Leo Convoy's council. Alongside that, Ravage is a closely guarded secret of the Predacons. Primal only knows because of secrets and rumors that there were some Decepticons that were still used as agents. Swoop does not tell his students that he is Swoop. He calls himself the Veteran, and everyone just knows that he is an old warrior without knowing how old. Grimlock is the only one who normal rank-and-file people would come across. And considering the fact that he's been busted down time and time again, more than likely due to attempting to incite violence and disorderly conduct, he now comes off like just a belligerent, angry old man. If he were to start claiming that he were the G1 Dinobot commander, a lot of people would probably roll their eyes, just assume that he's being senile or attempting to trick them. Grimlock's need for fights more than likely led to him, at the very least, getting into multiple confrontations, probably with younger officers on some of the other science vessels he went on, which explains why he's such a low rank for a Grimlock. As I said, he got busted down for insubordination. And now, as an old man who has a hard time doing anything, he chooses to sleep on these vessels he goes on, but still enters them in the hopes that maybe, just maybe, there will be a need for someone to wake him up and tell him to do whatever he wants. This is Grimlock's ultimate fate, sleeping what's left of his life away, just praying that there will be one last big fight he can be a part of. He did not want peace. He never planned to survive the war. But the fact that almost all of his contemporaries, the characters he would have considered friends and rivals, they're all dead. That has to weigh on him. Snarl and Sludge and Slug do not exist by the time of the Beast Wars era. At the very least, they've never been mentioned. And Swoop has distanced himself from Grimlock. The Dinobots were the only Autobots Grimlock truly cared for. And even the ones that he had respect for, like Optimus Prime and Ratchet, they're dead too. Bumblebee is dead. RC is dead. Prowl is still around. And Prowl, part of the shadow government of the Maximals, is probably very much of a vested interest in making sure that Grimlock never gets that far up the pecking order. Grimlock has to watch as his best days get further and further and further away from him. I think he still remembers the G1 era. Very clearly, he remembers being an Autobot and fighting the Decepticons. Unlike someone like, say, Prowl 2 or Inferno, I don't think this is a matter of Grimlock forgetting who he was. He just doesn't care who he was. He's apathetic to it. He doesn't care the honors he received. He doesn't care that he helped to end the war. What matters is that there's no war left for him. There's no peace for him, no happiness for him, no camaraderie for him. But worst of all, he can't fight anymore. That's all he had. He gave up everything to be the perfect warrior. But now he's a warrior without a war. That's the tragedy of this version of Grimlock for me. We've seen Grimlocks get happy endings in some way, shape, or form. In Regeneration 1, it stated that he went around and helped bring peace to other planets. In Earthspark, we see a Grimlock clearly shaken by war try to become better through the aid of his young friend Jawbreaker. But this Grimlock, with no friends, no support system, nothing to take pride in, nothing to do, nothing to occupy the time, nothing to give him hope or posterity or any sense of accomplishment, he's become the worst version of himself. I don't quite have pity for this Grimlock the way I do Prowl 2 or Inferno. I don't feel sympathy because this is a hell of his own design. Because he refused that companionship. Because he refused to work on himself. He suffers every single day, hoping for a war that will never properly come.